Hi guys, reading The Ghost of Fossil Glen, Chapter 9. The sound of the 12 o'clock whistle carried from the fire station to the cemetery. The class gathered their bag lunches and walked over to the Glen to picnic by the creek. When Allie saw Karen and Pam sitting close together and sharing their lunches, she sat down near Mr. Henry. Dub joined her. "Joey, you remembered your lunch?" Mr. Henry asked with a grin. "When it comes to food," said Joey, "I don't forget." From their flat, sunny picnic spot at the edge of the meadow, they could look down into the steep ravine that formed Fossil Glen. The silver stream of water rushed by, tumbling around corners and over rocks and fallen trees. If you remember, this is where Allie was when she fell off the cliff. Allie nibbled on her peanut butter and jelly sandwich, trying to concentrate on the flowing stream and the warmth of the sun on her back, instead of on Karen and Pam, who were looking her way and whispering. About half a mile downstream, Allie knew the waters of Fossil Creek emptied into the wide, deep bowl of Seneca Lake. Swollen with the spring rains, the creek seemed to be hurrying recklessly toward the lake. There's some personification. Later on, when summer came, the stream would slow down and warm up. It was as if it suddenly realized it didn't want to lose itself in the large, cold waters of the lake. Allie thought, and she smiled to herself. Dub reached over and took a handful of potato chips from Allie's bag. "The stream looks so small from up here," he said. "It sure does," Mr. Henry agreed. "It's hard to believe that little creek carved out this entire glen. These cliffs are over 200 feet. "Wait a second," said Julie. "Do you mean the creek used to be up here, where we are?" "That's right," said Mr. Henry. Slowly it cuts its way down through the dirt and rock to form the glen." "Wow, it must have taken a long time." "Where did all the fossils come from?" asked Joey. "They're from the time when this whole area was under a warm tropical ocean," Mr. Henry told them. "And then millions of years later it was covered by glaciers, right?" said Dub. "Right," said Mr. Henry. "I don't believe it," declared Karen. "It's true," said Mr. Henry. "Where we're sitting right now used to be the bottom of the sea." Everyone was quiet for a minute, trying to picture it. "That's awesome," said Joey. "We could spend the rest of the year just studying the history and ecology of the Glen," said Mr. Henry. "After all, here it is right in our own backyard. And as you're all noticing, it's really a very interesting place. And pretty," said Julie. To her surprise, Allie heard her own voice add, "But it's haunted." A shiver seized her, and she dropped her bag of chips. Fumbling to stuff the chips back in the bag, she heard the same faint whisper she had described to Dub. She felt his eyes on her and glanced up. He looked worried. "What do you mean, haunted?" asked Karen scornfully. I don't... Allie shrugged and looked down at her lap, embarrassed. She didn't know why she'd said that. "Oh, I get it," said Dub. "It's haunted by the ghosts of the Indians who used to live here, the Senecas." Allie knew Dub was trying to help her out. Opening her mouth to answer, she heard the whisper again, and the back of her neck felt prickly and cold. Again, to her surprise, she heard her own voice speak. "No," it said. "Someone else." Karen made a disgusted face. "Here we go," she muttered, but softly so Mr. Henry wouldn't hear. "This ought to be good." Dub glared angrily at Karen. Mr. Henry, unaware of the tension, laughed. "Allie must be thinking of the spirits of all those little critters who died and became fossilized in these cliffs." Allie forced herself to smile and nod, unable to open her mouth again for fear of what might come out. "Those are two subjects we might pursue," Mr. Henry continued. "The creatures and the native people who lived here before us. And, speaking of people who lived before us, I guess we'd better get back to the cemetery and go to work." Everyone rose, picked up the picnic clutter, and started walking back to the cemetery. Allie could feel Dub eyeing her wearily. "Don't ask me what happened," she said, "because I don't know. I didn't mean to say anything. It was as if someone else was talking, not me." Dub was quiet. "Say something," Allie pleaded. "You think I'm a nutcase, don't you?" "No," said Dub slowly, "but I think we'd better figure out what the heck is going on." Allie was relieved to hear Dub say "we." "What are you doing after school?" Dub asked. Allie thought for a minute. Then she remembered. "I'm supposed to go down to Mom's shop to look at a desk." "Oh," said Dub. "Okay. Why?" "I thought maybe you could come over and we could fool around on the computer. Maybe do some searches." Allie was puzzled. "Searches? For what?" Dub shrugged. "I don't know. Stuff about ghosts." Allie stared at him. "Ghosts? Dub, you don't really think..." She stopped. She could see that Dub was serious. And the truth was, it was exactly what she'd been thinking, but she'd been afraid to say it out loud. She hadn't even wanted to think about the possibility. Ghosts. For as long as she could remember, she'd been hoping for something really exciting to happen. She'd believed in the unbelievable, expected the unexpected. She wanted it to be true that there was more to life than the everyday world people saw. But now that something totally inexplicable seemed to be happening and happening to her, she felt partly thrilled and partly afraid. I know, said Allie. Come with me to the shop. It won't take long to look at a desk. Then we can go to your house. Okay, agreed Dub. They reached the cemetery and began working where they had left off. Soon they met the other members of the team near the middle. When they had straightened and cleaned the last headstone, they all stood together and stretched their tired backs. Most of the other teams were finishing up, too, and were looking around at the results of their work. Hey, this place looks great, said Brad. Mr. Henry joined them. It sure does. He called the rest of the class over and said, the buses will be at school soon, so we need to get back to the room and quickly to get ready for dismissal. He looked around again and smiled. You should all feel proud of what you accomplished here today. I've been thinking, what if we turned Earth Day into Earth Week or even Earth Month? We still have our composting project to do, and we seem to have lots and lots of questions about Fossil Creek and Fossil Glen. The kids nodded enthusiastically. Of course, said Mr. Henry with a smile. That means we'll have to come back here for lots of field trips. Maybe you'd rather stay in the class all spring? No way! Field trips are right. Somebody cheered, and Joey gave an ear-splitting whistle of approval. Karen raised her hand. Do we have any homework tonight? No homework. Yes. Excellent. But I'll probably be up half the night doing mine, added Mr. Henry. The class looked at him quizzically. I'll be reading your journals, he said. And knowing you all, I'm sure I'll have a fascinating evening ahead of me. Dub and Allie exchanged a glance. Little does he know, said Dub with a mischievous grin.